Governor, thank you for one last, hopefully final chat with me today.
My pleasure.
First, let's just talk about what you're doing here today, Nebraska Tourism Awards. What does that look like for the state, and what does that mean to you as governor to see all these great people here today?
Yeah, you know, a lot of people don't realize how big tourism is for Nebraska. I mean, obviously, people know that we're an agricultural state. That's our biggest industry. Manufacturing is number 2, but tourism is right behind them. In fact, last year, tourists who came to Nebraska spent $3.6 billion, and that's a big deal. So we're here today to recognize all the folks who have worked so hard to make tourism such a great industry here in Nebraska, and especially in light of the pandemic bouncing back. Tourism has bounced back very quickly here in Nebraska, especially compared to some of the other parts of the country. You know, that $3.6 billion is about 64% higher than what it was in 2020, and the national average, tourism only bounced back 48%. So we're doing really well here. We want to recognize the folks who made that happen.
So let's jump right into it. You're coming up on your last weeks as governor of Nebraska after 2 terms leading this state. I guess what's in the plans for your last final weeks in office?
Well, we've still got a lot of work to do with regard to implementing some of the legislation we passed earlier this year. So for example, broadband, we've got work around that. We're working around our water projects, whether it's the Perkins County Canal or the other projects that are going on because of the Star Wars project. And then of course we got to get ready for the transition. We've got to be able to hand over the reins to the next person coming in, get them prepared, so we're making plans around all that. We're running through the tape. We're working hard. I'm continuing to travel the state, as demonstrated by being here in South Sioux. So we're continuing to get out and doing events like this as well, so it's really kind of my regular schedule plus all this extra stuff on top.
So what has been kind of your favorite memory or memories from your time in office? I'm sure there's a lot. You've got to do a lot of things, meet a lot of people, but what are some of those memories that stand out over the last 8 years?
Well, my favorite thing is when the 4th graders come to the state capitol for tours. They're generally learning Nebraska history. And so when I can catch them in the hallways of the Capitol building and quiz them about Nebraska history, that is my absolute favorite part. But you know, we got so many great things about Nebraska. It would be hard to pick stuff. I got to tell you, I do love the Burwell Rodeo. That is always a little slice of Americana. I mean, this is what our country is about. So maybe if you want to throw out one particular event, it would be the Burwell Rodeo. But you know, we got so many great things, it's just hard to pick.
And I was one of those Nebraska 4th graders many moons ago, so I do remember that.
Yeah.
Very, very much so. Is there anything you would do differently looking back on your 8 years in office? Is there anything that you would maybe change or do differently now?
Well, I mean, first of all, the thing about experience is you learn from the things you did in the past and you do differently. So, you know, I think you always have the chance to do better and do things differently. You know, I guess if there's one thing that probably stands out again is one of the things that I wish I'd handled differently. It was right at the beginning of my administration when President Obama was coming here. I was stressed about doing my State of the State address, and so I said, no, I don't really have the time to go meet him at the airport. But he is the President of the United States. So you kind of work around his schedule. So we did correct that. I did go meet him at the airport. But that would be one thing. It's like, oh yeah, in hindsight, probably should have just said yes right off the bat.
There's a lot of big moments, I guess, in Nebraska history over the last 8 years. Flooding, wildfires, COVID-19. How do you think your administration handled all of those big moments, looking back on them now?
Well, there's no doubt over the last several years, Nebraska has faced a lot of challenges, as has the rest of the country and the world. I'm just so proud of what Nebraskans have done. We're resilient, we work together, we take care of each other, and that's what we saw through the most widespread flooding in our state's history in 2019, through the pandemic years, and then now this year with the wildfires, we see it again. Just Nebraskans pull together, they're community-minded, and they work to get through it, and that's what we've seen. You know, Nebraska has, for example, come through the pandemic better than just about anybody else. You know, Politico said we were the #1 best pandemic response state. I think we came out #2 in the National Bureau of Economic Research. You know, we struck a balance here to be able to slow the spread of the virus, to let people live a more normal life, and it's really paid off. We kept kids in classrooms, we kept people in their jobs, and that's been very important.
Is that what makes Nebraska so special?
It's actually, at the end of the day, it's the people that make Nebraska special, and this culture we have here where people work together, where we treat each other with dignity and respect. You know, it really is an intangible about Nebraska that's just really special. Can't put a number to it, but it's one of the reasons why, again, we came through these challenges so well.
So what do you hope to see for the future of this state after you leave office? Whoever takes your place next and maybe even after that, what do you hope to see for the future of the state?
Well, we've got a tremendously strong foundation here in Nebraska right now. I mean, if you look at, for example, at the state level, our state revenues are running well above forecast, and that just is one indication of how strong our economy is. We've got one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country, one of the highest workforce participation rates, so people are working here in our state. Our kids are doing well in the classrooms relative to other states, recovering from the pandemic. We're sitting on $1.7 billion in our cash reserve compared to the roughly $250 million it fell to shortly after it came into office. So we're in a great position to be able to continue to grow this state, and I think what you're going to see is innovations in agriculture and manufacturing, and the fact that more manufacturing is coming back to this country are really going to create more opportunities for our state. I think it's the center part of the country that is really going to shine the rest of this 21st century.
So what do you think is your administration's biggest success over the last 8 years for the state of Nebraska?
Well, one of the things that has been tremendous that we've worked with the legislature on is the tax relief. We've passed tax relief packages now that by 2027 will deliver $12.7 billion in tax relief. But what it means for people is, because most of that's going to go to property tax relief, about $10 billion of it, is that, say, for example, if you have a $250,000 home in Lincoln, we're going to be able to give you a 30% rebate this year on what you pay into your local school district and the community college. It's going to end up being like $1,137. That's a house payment. That's really going to help people, especially in these high inflationary times. So the tax relief is really a key part of us making sure that because we're doing a good job of the state, we're giving money back to people, and they're going to be able to then help manage through these high inflationary times. I think that's a big deal.
So do you have any advice for the next governor of Nebraska, whether that is Pillen or if that's Carol Blood? Do you have any advice for whoever takes that seat next?
Well, I would say whoever takes over for me is the advice. Just keep working with all the folks across the state. Nebraskans are wonderful. Work with the legislature. Continue to focus on how can we create opportunities for Nebraska families. The N.E. Casey Foundation ranks us the #1 best state for children's economic well-being. That's something that we should continue to focus on, is what are we doing for our kids.
What do you hope your legacy is as governor of Nebraska?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm going to let the historians worry about legacy. I'm just really proud of the team that we have at the state of Nebraska, how much they've done for the people, how well we've improved services to the people we serve. I'm so proud of the team at the state, and really that did shine through this pandemic and through the floods before that, as the team just came together, worked very hard to be able to serve Nebraskans, and our state's better off for it. So
what's next for you after you leave office?
Well, the first plan was for my wife and I to be able to go on vacation. Obviously, there's the news with Senator Sass, so we'll see what happens with that. So, as always, you got to be flexible in this job. I certainly never would have planned on the most widespread flooding in our state's history, or a worldwide pandemic, for that matter. So you just got to stay flexible, and that's what I'll just continue to do in the future. I'd love to stay involved in helping the people of Nebraska, and we'll just see what that means.
So does the wife get to pick the vacation?
Yes, she does get to pick.
Okay, so one final question, and I picked this out of the video that was shared earlier. Do you eat cinnamon rolls with your chili?
Okay,
Is that a Nebraska staple for you?
So cinnamon rolls with chili. Okay, so I know that's a Nebraska thing. Not done in my household typically. We would have chili, like at lunch or dinner, and cinnamon rolls for breakfast. But it's actually a pretty good combination if you've had them together. It actually works.
It is. Anything else you want to add, maybe a message for Nebraskans as we move forward?
Well, we need to remember that we've got a very special place here in Nebraska. And we talked about it a little bit earlier. It's an intangible, but if you've ever lived anyplace else, you know it's real. That Nebraska is special because of the people and how they treat each other and how we work together. So we should never undervalue that. We should never take it for granted, and we should always protect it.
Perfect. Thank you, Governor.
Great. Thank you.
Appreciate it.